Hi there. My name is John Sweeney, and I'm the Director of Stewardship Development and Discipleship Ministries here at Vestavia Methodist. And welcome to Episode 3 of our exciting Discipleship Pathway Next Steps. The first episode, we learned about the Discover step, followed by the Engage step. Today, Bill and Kip are going to walk us through the Transforming step, that step where sanctifying grace engages us in a deep relationship with God and with this church. We think about the passage out of the book of Romans, where Paul says for us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds in our relationship with Christ. So, I invite you to enjoy this episode as we learn about transformation along the discipleship pathway.
Well, Bill, we're continuing to look at the discipleship pathway and how we can grow more deeply in our relationship with God and to find our way in the church and find the places that help us find a life of purpose that's centered in Jesus Christ. And so the pathway starts with discovering, and then last episode we talked about how we engage a little bit more deeply. And today we're looking at a place in life where we really start to see our lives transformed, to becoming more like Christ. And we've talked about it before, but this is built on the ideas of John Wesley and his understanding of grace.
Right. With prevenient grace, discovering, justifying grace, engaging. And this week, John Wesley's understanding of sanctifying grace as transformational. And so it is that understanding of living fully in God's grace the rest of our lives and knowing that God is transforming us. Like Paul says, we are being transformed by the renewal of our mind. Mm-hmm. Even the way we think is being changed by the grace of God. And so, once again, we go back to our house. Our couple that was out on the front lawn and the front porch because they were experiencing God's prevenient grace. Then they got to the doorway with God's justifying grace. Well, this week, it's sanctifying grace. And so, they are living in the house.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
We see them in the house, and they're in different places. The man is still just inside the door because in the older homes of John Wesley's day, the Victorian-style homes, those, as you first entered the door, you normally had a man's parlor and a woman's parlor on the different sides, and they were very formal, and you would bring your calling card, and you would be greeted there, and that was it. I mean, you just simply stood and talked or sat and visited and then left. Then you might go a little further into the house, like where the kitchen is here, mm-hmm. and you might make your way into where the dining room, the formal dining room was. And that was, well, now you're at table. And so you're sitting at table with someone. And so the conversation might be a little more personal.
But it's still sort of a formal relationship.
It's still somewhat formal, but then you go into the back part of the house where normally that was sort of the breakfast area, where the children were taught and the business of the house was conducted, very personal. But then you go upstairs. And, I mean, of course, in this house, you have a bedroom upstairs and you have a bathroom upstairs.
Right. And you've got a garage that I don't know what to do with.
The set did not come with a little car. I was a bit ticked.
Well, and I don't think John Wesley had a car.
He didn't, but I mean, he had a horse.
He did have
I could have put a horse in
that's
there.
True.
But, this area of the house, the bedroom and the bathroom and all that, that's about as intimate as you get. That is personal. And God, in sanctifying grace, God is wanting to take us from this very formal relationship where we still, our relationship with God still has that formality. We want it, but we're not as comfortable yet.
Yeah, and John Wesley preached a sermon where he called it the faith of a servant versus the faith of a son.
Right.
So that we move from this very formal relationship where we're doing what God tells us because, well, there's there's a policy book. Mm-hmm. You know, there are rules. There are things that you're supposed to do.
Yes. I should do this because I am.
And then, but when we really get to know God the rules aren't as important. We just love God,
Yeah.
and we want to do what our Father asks us to do because we love.
We're doing in essence what the rule said, but we're not doing it because it's the rule.
Right.
We're doing it because we want to please God, and we want to serve God, and we want to spend time with God. And so we're moving from the formal to the little bit less formal, all the way up to the very personal, where we are sharing our life with God, and through God's sanctifying grace, we're seeing our lives changed, even our minds renewed, where we start to think more like the way God would want us to think, and we talk the way God would want us to talk, and we act and we respond and we react the way God would want us to, because we are constantly being renewed by God's sanctifying grace.
And we're truly becoming more like Christ.
Right.
And so our actions, our responses, our thinking becomes more like God. And so truly it's a transformational process. There's one of the images used for sanctifying grace is a butterfly that, starts as a caterpillar and goes into a cocoon and is transformed. The word literally metamorph in Greek metamorphs into a butterfly,
right,
into a totally different form of creation. And so God's intent for us is to progress to where we become the greatest possibility that we were created for. Mm-hmm. And we work towards that, and we want that, but we can't achieve that on our own.
No.
But we like to say around here that we want everyone to find a Christ-centered life of purpose at Vestavia Methodist. And that's really describing what sanctifying grace is, because when we find our greatest purpose, we'll find it because we've been transformed by God to be the greatest person that we can be.
Right. For years, without saying it was what we were saying, our vision of being a church where everyone experiences a Christ-centered life of purpose is saying that we want to be a church that provides a community where everyone experiences not just God's prevenient grace, but also God's justifying grace, and then lives in God's sanctifying grace, being transformed into this Christ-centered life of purpose where they find their true purpose in Christ.
It's amazing to me when people really find that, then they really start spending a lot of their energies and time, and I see people volunteering for weeks at a time on mission trips, or every week helping in a food pantry, or helping at a homeless shelter, and people suddenly find this sense of joy, this sense of purpose that comes, and God keeps transforming them. They didn't start out there.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't think that they would be there, but suddenly, as they find that sense of purpose, their life begins to change.
Right. The Bible study, the small group that touched their life when they were out in the front yard and showed them how much God loved them and brought them into that deeper relationship, now they find themselves teaching.
Right.
That Bible study for those people that are out in the front yard.
Absolutely.
Because they want those people to experience it as well. They're being transformed, and they want to invite others into a life of transformation.
Or even if they started, say, with Rise Against Hunger and help pack a meal, we've seen people who then progress. So I want to go where that meal's being served because I want to help that community be transformed,
right,
to help farmers learn the best ways of agriculture. And I've seen engineers say, we can help solve that problem with water. And how can we help that community? And suddenly, all those gifts are coming together in one place. But it's a pathway. It starts out just simply discovering, but it ends up being totally transformed by the power of God.
Absolutely.